The call came at 4:17 a.m., one of those sounds that slices through your bones like a cold chisel. Her name was Elise Bennett, 54, operations director for a mid-sized publishing tech firm based in Boise, Idaho. The voice on the other end was flat restrained. Her sister Lila was gone, age 35, Army veteran, 2 tours in Iraq, honorably discharged. She survived roadside bombs and base lockdowns, only to be struck down in a Target parking lot by a man named Roy, who swerved through a red light while drunk on boxed wine and invincibility. Elise sat up on the edge of her bedphone, still pressed to her ear, long after the line went silent. Her hands didn't tremble from disbelief. It was recognition, the exact moment her life split into a before and an after. She opened her laptop, typed through tears. A short note to HR. 3 days, just 3. She even attached the obituary and offered to remote into the Friday metrics call. The response came in 21 minutes from Ken, her new VP of Operations. Regretfully, denied. It read, "We're entering Q1 audit season. Key deliverables due." Grief, it seemed, had no seat at the strategy table, so she showed up anyway. Mascara hardened into cracks. Eyes red from silent howling. Her key card still beeped green like the universe hadn't noticed. That day, in a meeting titled Growth Hack Sprint, someone said they needed to leverage emotional engagement pathways. Elise stared at them, wondering how many pathways they'd leverage if their sister was zipped into a body bag. Even Tina from UX avoided her. And Tina once cried when Elise remembered her cat's birthday. Ken didn't address her until 4:03 p.m., when she missed a comment on the Asana board. "You seem distracted," he said, sipping his lemon-sparkling water like it granted him executive gravity. "Maybe focus more on the campaign and less on whatever this is, whatever this was." That night, Elise sat alone with a photo of Lila, laughing over grilled corn in a lawn chair, dog tags visible against a tie-dye tank top. "Don't let a paycheck steal your spine," Lisi Lila had once told her. So Elise put on her black dress the next morning, emailed HR, "I'm attending my sister's funeral. Do what you need to," and walked out. What she didn't know was that by noon, her system access was revoked. By 3:00 p.m., she was locked out of Slack. She read the final email: employment terminated due to job abandonment in a Cracker Barrel parking lot, fingers numb around a styrofoam coffee cup. What surged through her chest wasn't sadness. It was purpose. Elise walked into the office the morning after Lila's death like she was stepping into enemy territory. Shoulders drawn up like armor, eyes vacant, blouse pressed so perfectly it looks like grief had ironed it itself. The downtown Boise high-rises' automatic doors whooshed open like they were welcoming a widow to a boardroom battlefield. No one said a word. They saw her red-rimmed eyes, the black cardigan still faintly smelling of church pews and rain. But everyone looked away, like sorrow might be catching. Daniel from design gave her a half nod that somehow said both "I'm sorry" and "please don't involve me." Sharon from payroll left a granola bar on her desk, then disappeared into the supply closet for 3 hours, pretending to be busy. Everyone else heads down. Slack status green, fingers clacking. No one dares make eye contact with a woman carrying emotional ruin like a coffee thermos. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was that they were scared to feel it too. Ken, her VP, ran the operations floor like a luxury cruise tyrant, all fake smiles and impossible metrics. He knew who used too much toner and who lingered too long in the break room. After his last outburst, when someone scheduled an ad campaign for the wrong time zone, his forehead vein pulsed so violently, someone started calling him KenBot 3000 behind his back. He was the kind of guy who probably left Yelp reviews for park benches. Elise sat at her desk, scrolling through campaign briefs, while her stomach felt like it was churning coffee grounds and battery acid. Her brain looped one line over and over: closed casket, because of her face. She muted herself on a Zoom call camera, off sobbing silently into a tissue stolen from the HR kitchenette. No one asked if she was okay. Or maybe they noticed and chose to ignore it. The irony struck her like static. She was building ad funnels for a car insurance campaign while her sister had died in a car crash. At 4:27 p.m., the Slack ping blinked, still behind Elise. No context, no punctuation, just a digital prod reminding her who owned her hours. That was it. She rose, walked to the break room, poured herself a cup of the office's stale dark roast. Took one long, bitter sip, tasted like burnt filters and betrayal. She marched back to her desk. Opened her email. Subject line, funeral leave, final notice to HR. As communicated previously, I will be attending my sister's funeral tomorrow. Obituary and service program attached. This is non-negotiable. Do what you must. She hit send, closed the laptop, stood up, and walked out. That night, Elise didn't cry. She just breathed, like someone finally remembering how. Elise lay on the couch, wrapped in her sister's old hoodie, the one with the frayed cuffs and faint scent of lavender detergent and cold air. Her fingers curled tightly around Lila's dog tags, fists clenched like she could hold time still. Around her, the apartment was silent blessedly. So, no Slack pings, no Outlook reminders, no circling back emails about Q1 deliverables. Just quiet. Just goodbye. The funeral took place on a gray Thursday morning in Caldwell, the kind of morning where even the clouds seemed draped in mourning. The air smelled like wet pavement and diesel fumes from the funeral convoy. Inside the small white church, every pew was packed with uniforms and stiff black collars. Elise stood front row, spine-straight grief stitched into every muscle. She held the folded flag so tightly her knuckles went pale. Lila's commanding officer cried harder than some cousins did. When the rifles cracked outside, Elise didn't flinch. She just stared at the casket, half expecting to hear her sister shout from the afterlife to turn off the damn bugle already. The ride home was wordless. She was wedged between her mother's quiet sobs and a Tupperware of lasagna no one asked for, but everyone brought. Her phone stayed on airplane mode. The world could wait, but it didn't. At 9:13 p.m., still wearing her funeral dress, Elise powered her phone back on. A flurry of missed calls, pings, and emails buzzed in, but one subject line punched her right in the sternum termination notice. Immediate action required. She clicked. Elise, due to your unapproved absence and failure to meet project commitments during a critical cycle, we are considering your position abandoned. Your employment is hereby terminated, effective immediately. No severance will be extended. Please return all company property within 48 hours. No. We're sorry for your loss. No. Thank you for your time and service. Just a template. Just a slap in Times New Roman. She tried logging into her work email. Locked. Slack disabled. Her calendar cleared. Like she'd never been there at all. She didn't cry. A concrete stillness settled in her chest, heavy and cold. Her rage didn't roar. It didn't rise. It focused, cutting clean like glass. She stood up, walked to the closet, peeled off the dress, and slipped into old sweatpants that still smelled faintly of Lila's Shepherd mix. From that weekend, she dog-sat during a snowstorm. Then she sat at the kitchen table, pulled open her personal laptop, began opening folder after folder, presentations, metrics, emails, every file she'd ever backed up just in case. She didn't know the next step, but she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Something in her gut told Elise this wasn't the end. Not even close. She didn't want her job back. She didn't want an apology coached by legal or a severance packaged with an NDA. She wanted something else. Not revenge. Recognition. She was done being erased. That night, after the email and the silence and the strange stillness that felt heavier than grief, Elise sat at her Formica kitchen counter, a half-empty bottle of Oregon Merlot beside her. She couldn't remember opening it. The cork was on the floor, Lila's hoodie still draped over the back of her chair. She opened Facebook. If this story resonated with you, go ahead and tap subscribe. Not just for me, but for every quiet fighter who's ever been underestimated. The next chapter's already brewing, and trust me, you'll want to see how it unfolds. No rage, no capital letters, Just facts typed plainly, line by line. My younger sister was hit by a drunk driver last week. I asked my employer for 3 days to attend her funeral. They said no. I went anyway. They fired me. No call, no severance, no, we're sorry. Lila served in Iraq. I served 5 years in that company. One of us got a folded flag. The other got a template email. She stared at the screen thumb hovering. Then she tapped post. No hashtags, no selfie, just grief converted into bullet points. She expected a couple of reactions. Maybe a few coworkers would like it out of guilt. Maybe her Aunt Nora would comment something about God's timing. But by midnight, her phone started buzzing like a wasp nest. Reactions, shares, messages, so many that her phone lagged and then froze completely. People weren't just sympathetic. They were furious. An old college roommate messaged Elise, "Is this about Brightwell Media? Because, girl, I've got receipts." A woman she barely knew from a compliance workshop in Spokane sent, "This is unethical, possibly illegal. Let me know if you want guidance." But the message that made Elise sit upright came from Julia Tran, a journalist with the Northwest Accountability Collective. They hadn't spoken in a decade, but Elise had always admired her. The message was short. "Saw your post. Can I help you tell this story?" Elise hesitated. Her instinct was to shield Lila's name, her memory, her service. She didn't want her sister's sacrifice tangled in digital outrage. Didn't want her death reduced to a headline between TikTok drama and political scandal. But then she remembered what Lila told her the night before, shipping out to Mosul while eating microwave nachos on Elise's couch. "If they ever do you dirty, Lisey, don't just light a match. Build a bonfire. Make it useful." So Elise typed no company names. "Not yet, but I'll send you what I've got." Then she hit send. The bonfire had begun, and she did. Elise compiled everything she had. A PDF export of the full email thread with HR. Calendar screenshots showing her time-off request overlapping perfectly with a team-wide invite titled Q1 Kickoff Champagne and Strategy. A Slack message to Ken sent at 6:42 a.m. the morning after Lila died. "Just wanted to keep you in the loop. My sister passed last night. I'm requesting bereavement leave." His reply, one word, noted. She closed her laptop and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. She didn't sleep, just laid there, Lila's hoodie draped across her face like a weighted blanket. The air felt thick with something forming, not quite rage, not quite panic. Something was shifting, like thunder warming up its voice. The local news segment aired at 6:03 p.m. on a Wednesday, squeezed between a grocery store stabbing and a kitten rescue at a firehouse. Local media never quite knows how to stack emotional gut punches, but it didn't matter. The story hit hard, brutal in its simplicity. 2 minutes and 29 seconds of restrained devastation. No company name. No faces blurred. Just a pixelated quote from her termination email, a muted shot of her company's headquarters, and a calm, clipped narrator explaining how a woman was fired after attending the funeral of her Army veteran sister. At the end, Julia Tran's voice softened. The family asks for privacy and accountability. Then the internet did what it does best. A Reddit user freeze-framed a blurry portion of the email and matched it word for word with a known HR template used by several West Coast firms. The speculation exploded. A TikTok creator added it to a video titled, "Tell me late-stage capitalism is broken without telling me," and it blew past 300,000 likes by midnight. Elise watched it unfold, barely blinking. Like watching a fuse burn in slow motion. LinkedIn lit up next. HR leaders started weighing in with posts like, "This is why we build better policies. We'd never treat someone this way." At least, not anymore. Veterans flooded in after that. One woman, a former Air Force mechanic, wrote, "My brother didn't die in combat, but if someone had fired me during his funeral, I'd have flipped a desk and set fire to the policies." By sunrise, "Fired for Grieving" was trending. Her former company's website got hammered. Comments locked, Contact page disabled. Their most recent blog post, 7 Ways to Maximize ROI in Ad Campaigns, was flooded with replies like, "Try not firing someone at their sister's funeral first." Elise just watched from her couch knees, pulled to her chest, still wrapped in Lila's hoodie. She wasn't joyful. She wasn't vindicated. It felt like watching an avalanche that started with a whisper and realizing she was the whisper. You can't unstart an avalanche. You just brace for the weight and hope it buries the right people. Elise's inbox became a jungle overnight. A former intern messaged her, "Thank you. I left because they made me adjust weekly engagement reports. Glad someone finally said something." An anonymous burner account forwarded an internal memo titled "Confidential Crisis Messaging Strategy," instructing staff to avoid public comment at all costs. The kicker: it was dated 2 days before the segment aired. Damage control on standby before the fire had even started. But the message that changed everything came from a name she didn't recognize, Jordan H., former data analyst. "Hey, you don't know me, but I saw your post in the coverage. I used to work there too. It wasn't just poor treatment. They fudged campaign data, pharma contracts, political accounts, CTRs. If you're serious about holding them accountable, I can help. But you didn't hear this from me." Elise stared at the screen. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands. She hadn't moved in minutes. That final line, "You didn't hear this from me," clicked something into place. She wasn't just the grieving sister anymore. She was standing at the edge of a rotten system, and it was starting to smell. Then came the press release. It landed like a thunderclap in the industry. Halbert & Co. is suspending its partnership with company name, pending internal review of ethical alignment protocols. No names, no details. But in the world of ad tech, you don't need to name names. Everyone already knows. Halbert & Co. wasn't just big. They were untouchable, a Fortune 100 behemoth with its own PACs lobbyists and half a dozen conference halls named after them. Within hours, 3 mid-tier agencies followed suit. Not paused, not under review, canceled. Like a flopped Netflix reboot with a 1.7 rating and a harassment scandal. One agency exec even tweeted a photo of herself tossing a branded water bottle into a recycling bin. Love the planet. Hate unethical ad firms. The CEO of Elise's former company tried to contain the fallout with a LinkedIn essay on rebuilding trust. But the comments section was a forest fire. One reply simply read, "Tell that to the woman you fired during her sister's funeral. Cheryl." And then came Ken's moment. Elise didn't see it live. But someone sent her the video 2 days later from a Proton Mail account subject line, "Your boy Ken meltdown mode." The clip, 47 minutes of pure managerial chaos. Ken pacing in his kitchen, eyes, red voice cracking, trying to corral terrified team leads on Zoom. And Elise, she just hit play and let it roll. Ken stood in his kitchen, red-eyed and sweating under overhead lighting, desperately, trying to wrangle 12 anxious department heads into some kind of messaging alignment on a choppy Zoom call. Elise watched the leaked video in silence. "We can't admit guilt," Ken said for the 5th time, his voice cracking. "But we have to look accountable." Then he groaned and added, "This is why I hate social media mobs. No respect for quarterly targets." At one point, a junior ops lead nervously asked if firing Elise during her sister's funeral might have been just maybe a bit short-sighted. Ken exploded. "I don't care if her sister was a Purple Heart or a damn Teletubby," he barked. "We had deadlines that clipped Purple Heart, or a Teletubby was clipped and posted on Twitter within hours, then remixed into a viral TikTok audio. The visual, a Teletubby marching over a gravestone labeled Q1 targets. Elise watched it twice. Then she minimized the video and opened a blank spreadsheet. Not out of revenge. Not yet. Out of instinct. Out of need. She needed order, a place to park the chaos that had been building in her chest like storm clouds. She created columns for dates, names, project tags, pulled old client briefs, email threads, meeting notes, internal dashboards with those discrepancies she used to brush off as marketing adjustments, and then she started comparing them. One campaign stuck out first, a major pharmaceutical brand's depression awareness campaign. She compared the internal CTR file on her old hard drive against the public-facing data from a presentation deck. Client-facing 7.2% CTR across 3 weeks. Internal tab 1.09%. Her stomach turned. At the bottom of the sheet in grayed-out comments, she found the note Trent said, "Bump these for optics. Legal doesn't need to see this. Just use the deck version." That wasn't sloppy math. That wasn't optimization. That was fraud. And it wasn't the only one. She found 5 more, one for a prenatal supplement brand, one tied to a military recruitment campaign, another for opioid recovery services. Some were subtle. Some weren't even trying to be. She highlighted the campaign dates. They all aligned with one key moment, the period when Halbert and Coes had reported record-breaking engagement during their quarterly earnings call. Her breath caught. This wasn't a glitch. It was a system, a pattern. And now she could see the seams. She backed everything up. Cloud, hard drive, 2 printed copies in labeled folders. She even sealed one in a Ziploc like she was preserving evidence in a crime scene. The file was buried in a folder on her old desktop titled Q3 Triage. Final 2. Because of course it was. She opened a blank document, hands shaking. Then she started writing. It wasn't a manifesto. It wasn't even a statement. It was just a cold clinical email. No greeting, no sign-off, no emotion. Please find attached documentation suggesting systematic data misrepresentation by company name related to your digital ad campaigns from Q3. A full audit is advised. This communication is anonymous. A concerned former analyst. She created a burner, Proton Mail, zipped the files, and attached everything: spreadsheets, internal emails, screen recordings from campaign dashboards, even timestamp performance deltas. The first email went to the compliance office of the pharmaceutical giant whose campaign had been doctored. Then she wrote a second version, more detailed, more chronological, complete with a folder labeled Suggested Violation Categories. That one she sent directly to the SEC whistleblower inbox. No return address, no metadata, just truth wrapped in cold numbers. When she was done, Elise leaned back in her chair and stared at the blank Word doc she'd opened instinctively, like her hands didn't know what else to do. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. She didn't feel fear or triumph, just stillness. She was done hiding. Done with 5 years of swallowing insults disguised as feedback, HR check-ins that were really soft threats, and meetings where Ken slapped her on the back and then used her slide deck without giving credit. Her eyes flicked toward the dog tags still hanging from the lamp on her desk. She whispered, "Told you I'd make it useful, Lila." The avalanche wasn't theoretical anymore. It had a direction, and now it had velocity. It hit fast. The pharmaceutical client, the one with the inflated CTRs and the pastel-toned Mental Health Matters campaign, pulled the plug. Not paused. Not under review. Pulled. Effective immediately. Their public statement was razor-sharp and only 2 sentences long. "We have terminated all media relationships with company name, following internal findings that raised serious ethical and reporting concerns. That contract had been worth $5 million a year. Gone. Evaporated in 36 hours. The industry noticed. Wall Street noticed. The company's inboxes flooded. By Friday, the legal team's phones were ringing nonstop. Compliance requests, media inquiries. A quiet email thread circulated internally. "We've received contact from the SEC regarding Q3 reporting discrepancies. All staff are to refrain from deleting any campaign documentation." These weren't settlement questions. These were subpoena questions. Elise watched it unfold from her couch, a mug of cooling diner coffee in one hand, Lila's old Zippo in the other. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just felt something settle deep in her bones. Confirmation. They hadn't just been cruel. They'd been criminal. By Monday, Ken was suddenly on sabbatical. The announcement came from his assistant. He needed quote time to reconnect with his family. Funny. The same man who once said, "Personal lives are what weekends are for." The legal team reshuffled like a deck of hot potatoes. 2 senior counsels were out by midweek. A new chief compliance officer was flown in from a crisis PR firm in Los Angeles, best known for cleaning up influencer meltdowns and fake wellness scams. Then came the leaks. Internal memos surfaced, Slack screenshots, budget projections with redacted campaign tags. And anonymous Glassdoor reviews started sounding less like disgruntled employee vents and more like war crime testimony. Next came the boardroom bloodletting. First to go, the CFO quietly scrubbed from the leadership page by Wednesday morning. Then, the SVP of marketing, who hadn't posted on LinkedIn since the story broke. And finally, the CEO's college roommate who'd been parachuted into a strategic innovation role and famously didn't know how to open a pivot table. By Friday, nearly half the executive bios were gone from the website, wiped, scrubbed clean, like a crime scene that still reeked of panic and burned quarterly targets. Then the message came. A mid-tier media podcast reached out. Nothing major, but earnest. They promised anonymity. They'd use a voice modulator, said it would make the story sound cinematic. Elise hesitated, then agreed. She sat in her living room, dog curled at her feet, wearing Lila's old fleece hoodie headset, snug heart pounding under layers of restraint. She told the story, the HR emails, the Slack messages, the silence in the office, the funeral, the locked accounts, the firing. She didn't name the company. She didn't have to. And when the host asked quietly, curiously why Elise thought they'd done it, why a company would discard someone during their worst moment, she took a breath and said, her voice now filtered into a low, digital echo. They fired me for grieving. There was silence. A full 9 seconds of it. The host didn't interrupt. The audience didn't need more. By morning, the clip had 600,000 shares. Elise wasn't the villain. She wasn't the hero either. She was the truth. And truth once spoken doesn't go back in the box. The layoffs hit that Monday because of course they did. No warning, no meeting, just deactivated badges, locked laptops, a pre-written email from a transition operations group no one had ever heard of. The reason, reorganization to align with evolving market standards. The reality, implosion. The company's website flickered, then went dark, replaced by a blank white screen, and the message, under maintenance. We'll be back soon. But everyone knew what that really meant. Corporate hospice. Clients scattered like rats off a burning yacht. Internal dashboards stopped syncing. One former project manager posted a screenshot of her severance email with the caption, "Cool. Guess grief really is contagious." Meanwhile, across town, Elise sat on her porch, a steaming mug in hand, wearing the hoodie Lila once wore during their last Thanksgiving together. She didn't smile. She just exhaled. Her laptop sat open on a chipped pine patio table, sunlight catching on the scratches like tiny battle scars. A coffee mug beside it, cream-colored with navy letters that read, "Data," which let off faint curls of steam. Elise wasn't browsing job boards. She was building something. It had started as scribbles in a notebook during those first long nights after the story broke. Just scattered ideas. But now it had a name. The Lila Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping veterans and their families navigate workplace discrimination, toxic HR systems, and post-service trauma, the kind corporate America conveniently pretends doesn't exist. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't grant-funded. But it was real. She already had 2 pro bono lawyers on board, one an Army vet turned compliance watchdog, the other a retired therapist, who told her, "It's about damn time someone did this." She wasn't trying to go viral anymore. She wanted structure, a shield, a lighthouse for people like her and Lila. Then came the final blow. The article dropped just before midnight. No splashy graphics, no breaking banner, just a black font headline that hit like a brick. Sources confirm whistleblower triggered SEC probe into digital ad fraud. At company name? Her name wasn't in the piece. Didn't need to be. The comments section became a war zone. Former employees, analysts, watchdog groups, and righteous strangers armed with subpoenas and screenshots. And buried, halfway down the page, a real estate listing. modern suburban home. Open concept, sad-looking fire pit in the backyard. Status-motivated seller. It was Ken's house, his LinkedIn gone. His company email auto-replied with no longer with the organization. Elise didn't smile, didn't cheer. She just clicked submit on her LLC paperwork. Watched the loading icon spin like a slow digital exhale. Then she leaned back in her chair, hand around her mug, back pressed against the old wooden seat Lila built for her with leftover 2x4s after Elise's divorce. She closed her eyes as the sun climbed over the rooftops of Boise. Let the warmth press against her collarbones like a quiet affirmation. Grief didn't break her. It built a fire they couldn't survive. And truthfully, this one hit different. Not because of how cold the company had been, but because of how precise her response had become. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a scream, it's a spreadsheet. Compassion might be optional in corporate America, but consequences, not so much. If you've ever been pushed aside when you needed compassion the most, then you know exactly how this feels. I didn't ask for a fight, but I didn't run from one either. So if this story moved, you leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done, or what you did when life knocked you down and your workplace made it worse. And remember, this dignity isn't something they give you. It's something you refuse to let them take. Support those who speak up. Share stories like this, because silence protects power and truth protects people like us.